You've probably seen these films. You might even love them. But what if I told you that some of the biggest cult classics, genre-shaping hits and nostalgic favorites, films many viewers simply assume were directed by men, were actually made by women? Today, we're shining a light on the titles whose female authorship often goes unnoticed, even though these films have quietly helped shape modern cinema. Welcome to A Take of Her Own, a feminist film club where we celebrate cinema directed by women, 10 films at a time. This week, we're looking at 10 films you didn't know were directed by women, from blockbusters to horrors to childhood staples that deserve a second look with their true creative voices in mind. So, let's dive in and rediscover these films through the eyes of the women who actually made them. Let's start with the film that surprised me the most. Because I have to admit, I didn't actually watch this one until a few years ago, and I'd always been under the impression that it was a very masculine movie. Oh, how wrong I was. Because the legendary, meme-inspiring American Psycho was directed by the brilliant Mary Harron.
When I see a pretty girl walking down the street, I think two things. One part of me wants to take her out and talk to her, be real nice and sweet and treat her right.
And what'd the other part of him think?
What her head would look like on a stick.
American Psycho is one of those films people are convinced must have been directed by a man. Which is funny, because Mary Harron understood the world it satirizes with far more precision than most of its loudest commentators. It's a film often misread as a celebration of excess or an ode to a stylish psychopath. In Harron's hands, it becomes something far more biting, a portrait of a world where status replaces humanity and where a man disappears into his own reflection, all while believing he's the center of the universe. Harron's adaptation of Bret Easton Ellis's novel isn't really about murder, not primarily. It's about a culture so consumed by surfaces that no one ever truly sees anyone else. Patrick Bateman is less a character and more a collage of status symbols: business cards, skincare routines, designer labels, restaurant reservations that signal importance but mean absolutely nothing.
Look at that subtle off-white coloring. The tasteful thickness of it. Oh my God. It even has a watermark.
Everything in his world is performed. Success, masculinity, intelligence, even charm. It's all curated, polished, hollow. And that hollowness is the point. Bateman keeps trying to construct an identity out of brand names and borrowed behaviors until the only way he can think to feel distinct is through violence. The murders escalate not because he becomes more evil, but because he becomes more desperate. Desperate to be original, to leave a mark, to exist in a world where everyone looks interchangeable and everyone is far too self-absorbed to notice him anyway. Harron leans into the dark comedy of that idea, that Bateman's crimes go unnoticed not because he's a criminal mastermind, but because no one in his social circle pays attention to anything beyond their own reflection. In this universe, you could confess to murder over dinner, and the only response you'd get is someone trying to one-up your reservation. Her direction is razor-sharp, restrained, and deliberately controlled, far more satirical than sensational. Rather than glorifying Bateman, she exposes him, a man so emotionally and intellectually vacant that even his violence feels like another empty performance.
There is an idea of a Patrick Bateman. Some kind of abstraction. But there is no real me. Only an entity, something illusory. And though I can hide my cold gaze, and you can shake my hand and feel flesh gripping yours, and maybe you can even sense our lifestyles are probably comparable, I simply am not there.
Right. From Wall Street nightmares to more literal ones, let's move on to Pet Sematary, directed by Mary Lambert, an unexpectedly sharp, stylish, and deeply unsettling horror, directed by a woman the industry kept trying to underestimate.
Mr. Crandall, there's a path over there. Do you know where it goes?
Oh. Yeah? That's a good story.
Mary Lambert took Stephen King's bleakest novel and delivered something far more interesting than a standard studio scarefest. Her version is a film about grief as a contamination. Once it enters a family, it spreads, mutates, and eventually destroys everything in its path. The supernatural horror is memorable: the burial ground, the resurrection, Zelda in the back bedroom. But what really hits is Lambert's instinct for emotional framing. She shoots the story like a tragedy that was always going to happen, placing the characters in compositions that feel slightly too wide, too empty, too quiet, as if the world around them is already grieving before they are. And she treats the father's actions not as bad decisions in a horror movie, but as an escalating, recognizable human delusion, the belief that you can outsmart loss if you just try hard enough.
No matter how much you may feel you have to, do not go on to the place where the dead walk.
Lambert's direction gives the film its bite. The violence is brief but shocking, the atmosphere is funereal, and the ending feels inevitable in a way Hollywood rarely allowed horror to be at the time. Pet Sematary became a box office success, a cult favorite, and one of the most effective Stephen King adaptations, all achieved by a director who brought a distinctly female perspective on grief, obsession, and the quiet, awful things families don't say out loud.
Remember, Doc, the barrier was not meant to be crossed. The ground is sour.
Next up on the list, something completely different. Clueless, directed by Amy Heckerling.
I felt impotent and out of control, which I really hate. I needed to find sanctuary in a place where I could gather my thoughts and regain my strength.
Clueless is often remembered as a bright, bubbly teen comedy. The outfits, the slang, the mall. But what many people miss is that Amy Heckerling wasn't just making a 90s classic. She was adapting Emma by Jane Austen. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Cher Horowitz is a modern Emma Woodhouse, privileged, well-intentioned, a little delusional about her own wisdom. Her world, Beverly Hills High Society, mirrors Austen's drawing rooms, a closed ecosystem obsessed with manners, matchmaking, and social positioning. The difference is that here, status is measured in popularity, designer labels, and debate class charisma. Heckerling's genius is the way she translates Austen's wit into a contemporary setting without losing the sharpness. The film may sparkle, but it's not shallow. It's a satire, gentle, affectionate, but still unmistakably pointed. Cher's confidence in her ability to fix people, to orchestrate romance, to control her little universe, all of it comes straight from Austen. And just like Emma, Cher must face the uncomfortable truth that she's not nearly as perceptive as she thinks she is.
I'm amazed.
That I'm devoting myself so generously to someone else?
No, that you found someone even more clueless than you are to worship you.
The makeover scenes, the social scheming, the misguided matchmaking, they're not just teen movie tropes. They're Austenian character arcs reimagined in plaid skirts and yellow tartan. What Heckerling does brilliantly, though, is give Cher a sense of emotional growth without punishing her for her privilege or femininity. Instead of treating her interests as frivolous, the film takes them seriously enough to critique them, and to appreciate them. It's a rare teen film that lets its heroine be girly, wealthy, kind, flawed, and clever all at once. Clueless endures not because it's fashionable, but because it understands exactly what Austen understood, that a young woman learning to see others more clearly and to see herself honestly is a story that never goes out of style.
I decided I needed a complete makeover. Except this time, I make over my soul.
And now for a very dramatic shift in tone, The Hurt Locker, directed by Catherine Bigelow.
25.
25 meters.
Roger that. You are now in the kill zone. Thanks for reminding me.
That's what I'm here for, baby.
The Hurt Locker is one of those films people confidently assume must have been directed by a man. War, explosives, adrenaline, machismo, the whole package. And yet it was Bigelow who crafted this razor-sharp portrait of an elite bomb disposal unit in Iraq, taking home 6 Oscars in the process, including, unbelievably, the first Best Director award ever given to a woman. Bigelow opens with a detonation and never really lets the tension drop. Her camera clings to the soldiers, often handheld, often far too close for comfort, recreating the jittery hyper-awareness of men who know that every object in their path could kill them. But the film's real power lies in how she studies the psychology of the unit's new leader, a thrill-addicted veteran who treats danger like oxygen. His arrival terrifies the men counting down the final days of their tour, and we watch their anxiety grow with every reckless decision he makes.
Hello, Sir Dad. First time working together? What do you think?
I think us working together means I talk to you and you talk to me.
You going on a date, Sanborn?
No, we're going on a mission. And my job is to keep you safe so we can keep going on missions.
It's combat, buddy.
It's not patriotism, spectacle, or heroic myth-making that drive The Hurt Locker, but an almost clinical fascination with the toll war exacts on the mind. Bigelow captures the strange, disturbing routine of daily life or death missions, the way adrenaline becomes both shield and poison. And yes, this blisteringly intense, viscerally physical, deeply unnerving war film, directed by a woman.
What are you doing? There's enough banging there to send us all to Jesus. I'm gonna die. I wanna die comfortable.
And since we're already talking about Kathryn Bigelow, because how could we not, let's stay with her for one more film, Zero Dark 30.
You know, there's no shame if you want to watch from the monitor. All right. Huh? Might want to put this on.
You're not wearing one? Is he ever getting out?
Never. Let's go.
Zero Dark 30 is another film that tends to shock people when they learn it was directed by a woman, not because women can't make films like this, but because Hollywood has spent decades pretending they don't. Here, Bigelow returns to the war on terror, but shifts her focus from soldiers on the ground to the shadowy backrooms of American intelligence, CIA black sites, interrogation rooms, military bases, and the bureaucratic maze where real-world decisions are made. We follow Maya, a fictional CIA analyst whose entire career becomes tethered to one mission, tracking down Osama bin Laden. As leads collapse, priorities shift, and political winds change, her determination only hardens. And Bigelow doesn't flinch from showing what that determination requires: exposure to torture, to morally corrosive compromises, to a world where empathy has to be deliberately switched off to keep going.
Your friend is a dying man. Please, help me. Please.
You can help yourself by being truthful.
Even though we all know how the story ends, Bigelow constructs the decade-long manhunt with such precision that the final raid plays like a breathless climax. What's remarkable isn't that a woman directed this film. It's that anyone still believes women don't make muscular, hard-edged, meticulously crafted political thrillers. Bigelow not only made one, she made one of the defining ones.
I want targets. Do your fucking jobs. Bring me people to kill.
Shifting gears again, this time to a powerful historical drama, Selma, directed by Ava DuVernay.
Well, Mr. President, I'm here to speak specifically about the denial of a basic American right for the Negro citizen, the right to vote.
Selma revisits one of the defining moments of the civil rights movement with a clarity that cuts through decades of myth-making. Instead of relying on the usual iconography, the frozen images, the comforting hindsight, the neatly packaged morality, DuVernay zeroes in on the human complexity behind the legend. Her Martin Luther King Jr. is not the sanitized figure of textbooks, but a leader navigating fracture, fatigue, and political pressure.
We've been going round and round on this for hours, and nothing's going to change the fact that it was Doc's decision and we have to support
This is a
him.
movement of many, not of one. So any choice we make has to be
Come
right
on,
for
Diana,
many.
you know that's not what I meant by that, all right?
People are angry, Dr. King. Angry.
And around him, Duvernay builds a portrait of collective action. Organizers, families, students, clergy, the ordinary citizens whose courage reshaped the American landscape. By widening the frame beyond a single heroic figure, she foregrounds activism as deliberate, strategic, and often painfully uncertain work. Stylistically, the film stands out for its balance of restraint and emotional precision. The violence is never sensationalized. Instead, it underscores how power operates, who is protected, who is targeted, who is allowed to be heard. Duvernay intercuts these moments with quieter scenes of intimacy and doubt, granting her characters an interior life that most historical dramas overlook. What emerges is a narrative that resists simplification. Selma reminds us that progress is not inevitable and that the forces resisting it are persistent and well-organized. But it also shows how communities, when united in purpose, can bend the arc of history through sheer insistence. It's a film directed with vision, political sharpness, and deep empathy, the kind of work that not only retells history, but reframes it.
But what we do is negotiate, demonstrate, resist.
And from real history to a very 90s vision of the end of the world, Deep Impact is next, directed by Mimi Leder.
The impact of the comet is going to be, well, disastrous. So this is it. If the world does go on, it will not go on for everyone.
Mimi Leder's Deep Impact arrived just weeks before Michael Bay's Armageddon, and the comparison has followed it ever since. Both films imagine a comet hurtling towards Earth and a desperate mission to stop it. But beyond that superficial similarity, they belong to entirely different cinematic species. Where Armageddon is all swagger, slow-motion hero shots, and flag-waving bravado, Leder opts for something far more grounded. Her film is meticulous, scientifically plausible, but above all, profoundly human. Leder splits the focus between the astronauts risking their lives in space and the ordinary people on Earth trying to make sense of the unimaginable. Journalists uncovering the truth, families facing impossible choices, teenagers learning that the world might end before adulthood. And that balance is what makes Deep Impact stand out.
No men and women over 50 in the general population will be included in the lottery. The evacuation of those who have been selected for the Ark will take no longer than 2 days beginning on August 12th.
Leder refuses to treat catastrophe as spectacle alone. She's interested in emotional logistics, how societies prepare, how individuals grieve, how the everyday becomes precious when time runs out. It's still thrilling, still cinematic, but it's shaped by empathy rather than machismo. And that difference is not incidental. It's what a woman at the helm brought to a genre long dominated by bombast. Clarity, nuance, and the radical idea that humanity matters as much as heroism.
At some point over the next 10 months, all of us will entertain our worst fears and concerns. But I can also promise you this: life will go on. We will prevail.
And now for a completely different vibe, let's talk about Big, directed by Penny Marshall.
Well, I play with all of this stuff, and then I go in and I tell them what I think.
That's it?
Yeah,
And they pay you for that?
yeah.
Suckers!
Penny Marshall's Big is often remembered as that charming body-swapping comedy where Tom Hanks plays a boy who wakes up in the body of a grown man. But beneath the playful premise sits a surprisingly sharp, bittersweet reflection on what adulthood takes from us. The film follows 13-year-old Josh Baskin, who makes a wish to be big and suddenly finds himself thrust into a world of office politics, responsibility, and relationships he's nowhere near ready to navigate. And that's the point. Marshall uses the fantasy setup not simply for laughs, but to show how effortlessly childhood joy is squeezed out by the seriousness and expectations of adult life. The film's most complicated legacy, of course, is the romantic plotline between Josh, mentally still a child, and a grown woman who believes she's dating an adult man. It's a thread that sits uncomfortably from a modern perspective, and the film doesn't interrogate it in the way we'd expect today. Yet, within the story Marshall is telling, it functions less as a romance and more as another marker of how ill-equipped Josh is for the world he thought he wanted. What begins as an exciting new freedom gradually reveals itself as overwhelming, emotionally confusing, and, ultimately, unsustainable.
Before I met you, I was in Little League. And I rode my bike to school, and I played with my friends and hung out with them. And
Josh, what are you talking about?
I want to go home. I miss my family, Susan, and I want to go home.
By the time Josh returns to his real age, Big has made a gentle but resonant point. Adulthood may look glamorous from the outside, but it often comes at the cost of wonder, spontaneity, and the ability to delight in the small things. Marshall delivers all of this with warmth, wit, and a light touch, crafting a film that's far smarter and more poignant than its high-concept premise might suggest, and a reminder that even in a studio comedy, a woman director can smuggle in a surprisingly profound coming-of-age tale.
Get it, do you? This is important!
I'm your best friend. What's more important than that, huh?
Next up is We Need to Talk About Kevin, directed by Lynn Ramsey.
Looks like someone's having a nice day. Enjoying yourself? Sorry. I hope you rot in hell, you fucking bitch!
Lynn Ramsey doesn't make easy films, and We Need to Talk About Kevin is perhaps the clearest proof of that. It's a story that traps the viewer in an emotional chokehold from the very first minutes. Ramsey tells it from the perspective of a mother whose son commits a school massacre, but instead of a sensational thriller, we get something far more unsettling. A forensic look at guilt, shame, and a kind of love that never quite found the right shape. The film drifts between realism and a near hallucinatory subjectivity. Ramsey pieces it together from shards of memory, impressions, and images that are meant to be felt as much as understood. Tilda Swinton, in one of the finest performances of her career, plays a woman imprisoned by a question with no satisfying answer. Was Kevin born this way? Or did something in their relationship make him so? Or is the truth buried somewhere no one can reach without hurting themselves?
Just because you're used to something doesn't mean you like it. You're used to me.
This is cinema that steps into territory usually dominated by a male perspective, violence, culpability, moral darkness, and approaches it differently, more intimately, and with a sharper emotional scalpel. Ramsey refuses to moralize or offer neat explanations. Instead, she immerses us in a tangle of feelings where nothing is clear-cut, and responsibility bleeds into everything, much like the recurring red motif that stains the film from start to finish. A striking reminder that women directors not only tell stories about darkness, but do so with boldness, intelligence, and a distinctive voice, and a film that truly deserves to be far better known.
Mommy was happy before little Kevin came along. You know that? Now Mommy wakes up every morning and wishes she was in France.
Let's finish strong with another haunting story. Monster, directed by Patty Jenkins.
Listen to me. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Give me a week.
week. You want to go later? I'll buy you a fucking ticket, okay? I'll take you there myself. Just give me a week. You'll never meet someone like me again.
Before Patty Jenkins became a household name with Wonder Woman, she made Monster, a brutal, intimate character study that feels far closer to tragedy than to the true crime label it's often given. The film follows Aileen Wuornos, a sex worker who became one of America's few female serial killers, but Jenkins pointedly refuses the usual sensationalism. Instead, she approaches Aileen as a woman pushed to the margins long before she ever picked up a gun.
I've been hooking since I was 13, man. Who the fuck am I kidding?
Charlize Theron's transformation, famous for its physical intensity, is just as astonishing in its emotional detail. Her Aileen is volatile, wounded, desperate for a scrap of affection, and clinging to a dream of a life she was never offered. Through her relationship with the shy, sheltered Selby, played by Christina Ricci, the film lets us glimpse the tenderness Aileen yearns for, even as the violence spirals beyond her control. Jenkins makes no excuses for Aileen, but she never dehumanizes her either. The film sits in the uncomfortable space between empathy and horror, asking how much of a person's story society chooses not to see until it's far too late. It's a challenging, unsettling piece of cinema and a striking example of how women filmmakers can navigate stories about violence and monstrosity without resorting to cliché.
We're good now, I told you. And that's what I mean. In my life, it's always been the harmless stuff that hurts the most. Whereas the thing's so horrible you can't even imagine it, it's usually a lot easier than you think.
So, how many of these surprised you? How many did you know were directed by women, and how many just quietly lived in your mind as part of the cinematic landscape, their authorship never really questioned? What all these films remind us is just how often women's creative impact gets obscured, especially when they're working in spaces the industry still labels as male, whether that's horror, action, sci-fi, or big studio comedies. The sheer range of styles, genres, and perspectives here shows that women have always been shaping mainstream cinema. Audiences were simply rarely encouraged to notice. And hopefully, after today, these films look a little different to you. A little richer, a little more complete. And maybe, next time you revisit them, you'll see the fingerprints of the women who shaped them. Not hidden, but unmistakably there. If you'd like to watch any of the films mentioned today, you'll find viewing suggestions, where they're currently available to stream or rent, in the description and in the pinned comment below. And now I'd love to hear from you. What films directed by women would you add to this list? Which ones surprised you the most, or which would you recommend to someone who's only just beginning to explore cinema made by women? This channel is all about building a community that discovers these films together, so drop your picks in the comments. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more like it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new list. Thanks for watching, and see you next week for another 10 films, another perspective, and another take of her own.